Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kari, and today I'm going to be talking about my 2024 reading journal. So I've actually already set up all the spreads in this journal, so this is going to be more like a flip through, so I can show you all the different spreads where I'm going to be keeping track of all my reading statistics this year in 2024, and then you can kind of get some inspiration for your own reading journal if you would like to keep similar reading statistics as I do. As you can see, this is actually my 5th year of keeping a reading journal. I started in 2020, so 2021, 2022, 2023, and now 2024. I absolutely love keeping a reading journal, and this is actually the second video that I've made about my reading journal. I'll link a video down below that I made last year where I went through step by step of making my 2023 reading journal, so you can see every step that I took to create all the spreads that I made. And I even went through some of my older journals and showed you some of the spreads that I had made in previous years and some of the changes that I was making between the previous years and 2023. And also I talk about all the supplies that I like to use in my reading journal. So if you're interested in any of that, I would check out that video that I linked down below. I would like to do a final flip through of my 2023 reading journal completely finished, so keep an eye out for that. All right, so let's get into this 2024 reading journal so I can show you all of the spreads that I've set up. So my first spread is the index. This is the first year that I'm doing an index, but I think it's going to be really helpful because I have way more spreads this year than I've ever had before. So it's going to be really useful to be able to reference this index to see where is the specific spread that I'm looking for. If I want to fill out something in particular, I can look for it here on this spread and not have to frantically be flipping through the journal looking for a specific spread. So as you can see here, I made a little column for the page number and then gave a little indication of what spreads you can find on those particular pages. As you can see, I have a lot of extra space here because my journal is going to keep growing obviously throughout the year, and then I'll be able to fill out the different contents. So something that you're going to notice in this reading journal compared to my 2023 reading journal, if you watch that, is that I have way more spreads than I did last year, because every time I finish a book, I get so excited to run to my reading journal to fill out all the statistics and everything. So I added way more spreads this year so that I can put in all of the stats, all of the information. I want to know everything at the end of this year about my reading. So already just from this index page, you can tell how many different types of spreads, how many different types of stats that I'm going to be keeping this year, and I'm really excited about it. So my first spread here on the left are my reading goals this year. So I have one box for each of my goals. So read 65 books, read 30 minutes a day, etc., etc. I do have 2 empty boxes here down at the bottom because I do want to create some more reading goals for myself. I'm not sure just yet what I'm going to put in these 2 boxes, but I have the space for them when I think of what those goals are going to be. If you have any reading goal ideas that you think might be interesting for me to put in these 2 boxes, definitely let me know. Put it in the comments below. I would love to see your ideas for reading goals that I could do for myself. And then once I've accomplished these goals, I'll be able to put a little X or color in these little boxes to indicate that I've achieved that goal. Then over here on the right begins my 24 books I want to read in 2024 spread, which continues onto the next 2 pages. So as you can see, I've cut out the covers of each of the different books that I want to read in 2024, and then I have some space down at the bottom where once I read those books, I'll be able to put my star rating just below. This one looks a little bit weird because if you saw my 24 books I want to read in 2024 video, I said that I want to read either The Little Friend or The Goldfinch, so that's why they kind of look like this. But all these other ones, those are the specific books that I want to read. So these are the first technically 6 books that I want to read, and then the next page is full of the rest of the 24 books I want to read in 2024 reading challenge, and these all have the space below to put the star rating below once I read as well. So the next spread here on the left, I have my read 65 books challenge. So for every book I read, I'm going to color in one of these little boxes. As you can see, it goes up to 65 because that's my reading goal, but I really do hope that I go over my reading goal, and usually I do at least go over by a couple of books, but this year I gave myself a lot of room and hopefully I'll be able to exceed 65 by a lot, but I for sure need to hit this 65, so those are the ones that are numbered. And so like I said, I'll just color in each one of these as I read a book. And then over here on the right, I have a spread to keep track that I read every day. So this is different than my goal to read 30 minutes every day. This is strictly that I read every day. Even if I read for 5 minutes, I can mark it off on this spread. So for each of these boxes, I'll put a little star if I read even for just for 5 minutes in that day. And then over here, I can put a little tally for how many days did I read in each of these months, and then at the end of the year I'll be able to say how many days did I read in 2024. So this is where I'll be tracking if I read at all every day, but this is where I'll be keeping track of did I read for 30 minutes that day, because that is one of my reading goals for 2024 and every year. That's my goal every year, to read 30 minutes every day. So this is where I'll be keeping track of that goal. So on this spread, obviously for every day that I read at least 30 minutes, I'm going to color in the little box of that day, and then at the end of the year I'll be able to see how well I achieved achieved my goal of reading for 30 minutes every single day. Now, I've said this before on some of my videos, I don't actually expect to read 30 minutes literally every single day, but this will give me a good view of how good was I? How often did I actually read for 30 minutes a day? Next here on the left, I have a spread for days I finished a book. So obviously it's self-explanatory. Every day that I actually finish a book, I'm going to color in or put a little star into the box. And then I can kind of see what the trend is. Do I typically finish books more towards the beginning of the month, in the middle of the month, at the end of the month? I think it will just be interesting to see the information on when do I typically finish a book, or maybe it's just going to be all over the place. We don't know. We'll see. And then over here on the right, I have an alphabet challenge, which was actually recommended to me in my last reading journal video to keep track of if I can read a book that starts with every single letter of the alphabet. So obviously I have the alphabet over here on the left, and then on the right, I'll write the title of the book that corresponds to that letter of the alphabet. And we'll see if I can read a book from every letter of the alphabet or not. Then on the next page, I have some more reading challenges. So this is different than my reading goals. These are just challenges that I want to set for myself to hopefully achieve this year. As you can see, I have space for 8 goals. So for example, I have here, read a book in 1 day, read a book over 700 pages, read a nonfiction book about Japan, read a Penguin English library. So this is a big collection of books that I have, and I would like to read one of those books. Read a subscriber recommendation. I usually read a few subscriber recommendations, but I just wanted to challenge myself to put that here. Read a classic, read a book randomly chosen at the bookstore that I know nothing about, that I just see it at the bookstore and I'm drawn to it and I pick it up. And as you can see, I do have space here for one more challenge. So if you have any ideas of a challenge that I can put in here, definitely let me know. And so then once I achieve one of these goals, I'm going to print out the cover of the book similarly to how I have here, and then I'll put it into the box here to show that I have achieved that goal. My next spread is about the Pop Sugar reading challenge. So this is just a reading challenge that Pop Sugar does every single year. And so I just put a tiny little summary of what each of the challenges are in here. Actually, they're way more wordy than this, so I kind of had to condense them to make them fit in here. But for example, read a book about a 24-year-old because it's 2024. Read a book about K-pop. Read a book by a visually impaired author. Read a bookseller recommendation. Read a book that features dragons. Read a book published in the year 2000. Read a book where the character sleeps for more than 24 hours. I don't know what book that's going to be other than My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh, but we'll see. I'm not actively going to be trying to achieve these goals. It's just if I happen to read something that fits into one of them, then I'll write the name of the book in these columns here. Next here on the left, I have a tracker to keep track of how many books do I read per month. I'll color in how many books that I read that month to keep track. In previous reading journals, I haven't kept track up to 24, like given myself the possibility to read 24 in a month, but I have recently started reading manga, so I feel like that's going to like boost how many books I read per month, because previously I did have it at 12, but that was before I was reading so much manga. So this is going to help accommodate how many more books I'm reading because I'm reading manga now as well. Then on the right is a little monthly summary where it's going to be kind of like an at a glance summary of all these different statistics for each month. So for example, in January, how many books did I read? How many pages did I read? How many fiction books did I read? How many nonfiction books did I read? How many were originally published in English? How many were translated? Because as you saw, that is a reading goal of mine, is to read more translated fiction this year. How many days did I read for 30 minutes a day? How many books from my 24 and 2024 TBR did I read? How many rereads did I do? How many 5 stars did I have? And how many books did I buy that month? So at the end of the year, I'll have this at a glance summary of all these different statistics. Then on the left page of this spread, I'm going to be keeping track of how many star ratings do I give each month. So as you can see, it's divided by month. Obviously, how many times did I give a 0 star or DNF, 1 star, you know, it goes up by increments of 0.5. And then here on the right, I'll be able to put an average star rating for each month, and I can compare what month did I have the most success with my reading according to the star rating. Then over here on the right, I'm going to be keeping track of books that I did not enjoy, that I will not be recommending. I just think it would be fun to have a little list of kind of like the worst books of the year, because after I read a book that I really didn't enjoy, I typically just erase it from my memory. But I do want to be able to keep track of the worst books that I read, just so, I don't know, maybe at the end of the year I can make a worst books that I read video, and this would make that a lot easier. Then on the next page, these two pages go together. It's my 2024 best book bracket. So as we go through the year, I'll be putting a picture of the book cover for the best book for each month. Similarly, again, to how I did here, that I'll cut out a little picture of the book cover and then put it into each of these boxes for each month. And then I'll copy the title of the book into the corresponding place into the bracket. And then as the year goes on, we'll continue to go down through the bracket. And then at the end of the year, I'll be able to say, what was my best book? And I'll put a little picture of the book that wins in this little box. You will notice that I don't put January versus February, March against April, and so on. I do try to mix it up, so I have January versus July and April versus October. Like I mix it up, so like I went January, February, March, April, May, June. You see, so it kind of mixes it up throughout the year so that I get books going against each other that I read throughout the entire year, not just books that I read back to back. Next, I have a spread to keep track of all the books that I give 5 stars. I do have slots for 18 books here. Again, I'll put a little picture of the book cover in the corresponding squares. I do hope to have more than 18 5-star books, but I'll add another spread later in the journal if we get to that point. So I think it would just be nice to have a little at-a-glance spread of all my 5-star books. Next, we have a spread to keep track of how many pages do I read per month. And as you can see down here, I made a little legend to say that each little box is for 25 pages. I did change this spread up from how I did it last year. Again, you can go check that out in the other video if you're interested. So we'll see if this works better for me this year. The next spread is to keep track of all the genres that I read. So I did put the genres that I'm most likely to read at the top and the ones I'm less likely to read at the bottom. So literary fiction, thrillers, nonfiction, horror, manga, graphic novel, short story, fantasy, and sci-fi. I know they're not the same thing, but I don't read very much fantasy or sci-fi, so I just put them together for the sake of space. Classics, theater, poetry, middle grade, YA, children's, all go together. So then for each book that I read, I'll just color in one box to indicate that I read something from that genre. So then in this spread, I'll be keeping track of how many pages does each book have that I read. So for example, if I read a 350-page book, I'll color in one of these boxes. So I did this exact same spread for the first time last year, and based on that information, I saw that I read mostly books between 200 and 299 pages and 300 and 399 pages. So I actually doubled up each of those spreads because I'm more likely to read a book from those page ranges. So I'll have double the amount of boxes to be able to color in. Whereas obviously I'm going to read a lot fewer books from these page ranges, so it doesn't matter that there's only one row. Next, we have my hours read per month spread. I am doing this the exact same way that I did it last year. And as I said in my previous video, I do use the app Bookly to keep track of how long it takes me to read every book that I read. So every time I read, I start a new session on Bookly, and it sounds like it would be a lot of work, but it's really not. It's just habit now to start my Bookly timer every time that I read, and that helps me figure out how long each book takes me to read, and then I can fill out this spread after each book. And obviously keeps track of how long did I read on each specific day. So if I start a book at the end of January and continue in February, I can mark how long I read that book in January and then put how long I read it in February into the next month. Next is a new spread that I'm doing this year, and I'm really excited about it because obviously one of my reading goals, like I said, is to read more translated fiction. So with this spread, I'll be able to keep track of where did those books come from that I read the translated book from. So I'll just color in the country of where that book came from, and then at the end of the year, I'll be able to see, okay, how widely did I read around the world this year? And of course, if I read a book in English, I mean, the first book that I read from an American author, I am going to color in the US or Australia or the UK, whatever. But my big goal is to be able to color in more countries around the world, thanks to reading more translated fiction. Next is a new spread that I'm going to be trying out where it's a line graph. So for example, in January, I read 10 books, so I'm going to put my dot up here. And then in February, I don't know, maybe I read 13 books, so I'll put a dot up here at 13 for February. But then also at the same time, I have how many pages. So I'll kind of have two line graphs going on at the same time. I'll have a line graph going for how many books did I read each month, and then also pages. So maybe it's going to be a bit more wide of a range depending on how long the books I read are. So I think this will be interesting to test out. We'll see how it goes. Next, this spread on the left is going to be dedicated to rereads. I do reread a couple different books every single year, so those will definitely go here, but there are a few books that I really want to reread, and I really hope this spread challenges me to reread those books. Some of my favorite books I want to reread, so we'll see if I get to that this year. And of course, I'll put the picture of the books that I reread into the little squares. Then here on the right, I have my library books read, because as you saw here, I do want to listen to more audiobooks, which I get from Libby from my library, and I want to be able to keep track of all of those books that I read in one place. Also, I get some manga from the library too, so I'll put all of that on this list here. Next, speaking of manga, I have a list here of the manga that I want to be reading. These are all series that I've already started buying or have already bought the entire set for these manga. So for example, Sailor Moon, I've already bought all of these. Codename Sailor V, which is also like an off branch of Sailor Moon, I've already bought those. The Rose of Versailles, however, I've only bought 2 volumes. Fruits Basket, I've bought 2. Drifting Classroom, I've bought all 3 already. Cardcaptor Sakura, I've already bought 2. So here is where I'm going to be keeping track of when I read each volume. Now, I did put space to put the name of the volume volume, which doesn't really make sense because I don't know if there are ever manga that each volume has a different name. I didn't really think that one through too well, so I'm just gonna have to put like volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, and then color in the box over here once I've read that volume. I think once I run out of this space, when I do my next spread for my manga, I'm gonna have to change something up. So if you have a suggestion, definitely let me know. Next is one of my favorite spreads that I did last year, and so I did it again this year, but before we even get into it, yes, I know that I misspelled releases, okay? This is something you have to get over when you make a reading journal, is that you're going to mess something up. You're absolutely going to, and you just have to get over it, which is really hard for me because I'm a perfectionist. So I'm just gonna have to look at this all year, and that's fine. Okay, so forgive me. But here I'm going to keep track of all of the anticipated releases for each month that I'm really looking forward to reading. And I do put a little box beside each title that I'm looking forward to getting. And once I buy the book, I'll color in the little box to indicate that I've already bought it. So as you can see, I have a little column for each month to keep track of all the books that are coming this year that I'm excited about, that I want to get my hands on. Next, speaking of getting my hands on books, I have this spread here that I did last year and I loved it. It's keeping track of all the books that I buy for the entire year. So as you can see here, I'm just going to keep track of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, keep track of literally how many books there are, and then I'll be able to mark off when I read it. So am I actually reading the books that I buy? Hauled it. So have I included that book in a book haul on my channel? What day did I buy it? The title of the book, obviously. And then this part is new this year. I'm going to keep track of how much did I pay for the book, and then at the end of the year, I'll be able to see how much money do I spend on books in a year. So I have this whole spread here. I've already created a second page because I know I'll buy this many books this year. And then I do have some empty pages to continue. Based on how many books I bought last year, I think, this is a good amount of pages to keep track of that. Then next, I have a little spread to keep track of advanced reader copies or ARCs that I get this year. I did only ask for 2 ARCs this year, but I wanted to give myself space in case I do want to ask for more this year, that I'll be able to keep track of them all in one place. So again, I'll print out the picture of the book and put them into each of the squares as I get them. Next, we have a little spread to do at the end of June here, like my halfway top 12. So halfway through the year, what are my top 12 favorite books? Again, I'll print out a little picture of the book to put in each of these squares. I do want to be able to rank them from number 1 to number 12, but I didn't have enough space to put a little number in here. So I'll just have to know that I go from 1 to 12. And then at the end of the year, at the end of December, I'll be able to put my final top 12 books on this page. And it'll be fun to see how did my top 12 evolve from the end of June to the end of December, and what stayed in my top 12 and what got kicked out. Next, I have a little spread just to keep track of some of my statistics for my YouTube channel. Then this is going to be a spread that I also did last year, and it's just my visual, what books did I read in 2024. So here you can see that I've kind of done the squares that I've put on previous spreads, but I didn't pin them in this time because I just want to put the book cover. So I've marked where they're going to go, but once I put the book cover down, I'm going to erase these pencil lines. So it's just going to be strictly visual, only the covers. So similar to this, how there's no box around it, it's going to look like this. And so imagine that this page looks like this. I'm going to have room to put down below how many stars did I rate that book. So I put them on the little dots to keep everything straight, and I'll go in order. So the first book I read, the second book I read, 3, 4, 5, okay, and go all the way through. And then as you can see, I have some empty pages, of course, because as I continue reading, I'll have more books to be adding. And then I have a strictly text version of what I'll be keeping track of here. Do I need both? Probably not, but I just love filling out stuff. So I made a text version as well. So I'll just put the title and author of every book that I read here, obviously without the picture of the cover because that's on the previous spread. So I do go up to 59 books, which my goal is 65. So of course I'm going to be going into these empty pages as well. I just haven't set these ones up yet because that's pretty far in the future still. Then we'll get into the actual month-to-month spreads. So everything so far is kind of like the yearly information. Like I'll go back to all of this information very often to continue filling it out. But then from here on out, I'll be doing monthly information. So this is the beginning of my January spread. So this is kind of like the homepage for January. So at the end of January, I'll be able to fill out all of this information. So how many books did I read in January? How many fiction books did I read? I'm going to put a little X in the little boxes here, like the boxes created shaded by the dots kind of, and then be able to keep track of how many fiction books did I read, how many nonfiction books did I read, how many ratings. Again, I'm going to put little X's in between the little dots to see how many 2-star ratings, how many 3.5 ratings, did I have that month. Also, I'll keep track of what genres did I read. I didn't pre-write out the genres because I'm not going to read every single genre every single month. So for example, if I read a literary fiction, I'll put litfic and then put an X. And if I read 5 litfic, I'll put 5 X's. And if I read 3 thrillers, I'll put thriller and then 3 X's. See what I'm saying? And then based on the information from this spread, I'll kind of synthesize it and put it into here. So how many pages did I read? I'll be able to tell that information from here, and I'll just put the number here. Same thing for time. How many hours did I read in January? I'll just copy that number and put it in the box. Then hauled, same thing. How many books did I haul in January? I'll just put that number here. And then here is just my day-to-day reading stats. I'm changing this from last year. Every single year I've done a completely different way. Like I've done it an old way, the same way the last 4 years. But this year is the first time I'm going to try something else. We'll see how it goes. So on January 1st, how many pages did I read? How long did I read? January 2nd, how many pages did I read? How long did I read? And keep track of that information individually day to day. Whereas this is just by month. You can't distinguish between the days here. It's just for the whole month, how many pages did I read? But here I'll be able to see per day, how many pages did I read? And then also I just want to put a little picture of the book that was the best that month and the picture of the book that was the worst that month. And then here I'm going to have a visual of the books that I read that month. So again, I'll just print out a picture of the book here. I have 3 per page. So I want to put like a picture of the book here. And then just if I have any little notes, a big mistake that I've made in previous reading journals is dedicating 1 book per page. Like this page would just be dedicated to 1 book. And then I never went back and like wrote my review. I had the intention of going back and writing my review for every single book, and I never did it ever. So I'm changing it up this year. I'm just going to put the picture here. I'm going to share the page with 3 different books and then kind of put just keywords over here of what I thought about it. Also, I'm going to indicate if I read it physically, by audio, on my Kindle, whatever. And also how long did it take me to read? How many pages was it? Just like little key information. So because I already know that I read 10 books in January, so here's 6 books, and then this goes up to 12 books. I'm not going to need more pages than this. So here is going to be February's like homepage, where I'll do this exact same spread again for February, and then kind of rinse and repeat for every single month. So that was my reading journal that I made for this year in 2024. I hope that you got some inspiration. Definitely let me know if you keep a reading journal and what type of statistics do you keep track of in your reading journal. I'd be really curious to know because like I said before, I want to keep all of the statistics. So if you have any ideas of stats that I could be keeping track of that I'm not already, definitely put it in the comments. I want to add a new spread at the end of my journal. And if you have any ideas for things I can do with any of my current spreads, like I said, I want some suggestions for some of the reading goals and reading challenges that I could be doing. Definitely let me know. I hope that you found a lot of inspiration from this video for your own reading journal. And like I said before, if you're curious about some of my previous reading journals and the supplies that I use, definitely check out that video that I made at the beginning of 2023, so you'll get all of that information in that video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again next time. Bye!